On this episode of Low Buck Garage, I check out my cooling system airflow. I work on some wiring.
So we're just going to assume all that wiring's totally fine and ignore it.
And some other miscellaneous things.
Bolt snapped completely off, so that made that faster.
And then this happened.
I mean, you see that semi in front of me, I'm actually gaining on him a little bit. Now in previous videos, you saw me drag this bus out of the woods and drive it across the country. I had a lot of little problems. The only one that really concerned me was the cooling. Because when you went up a long hill, it would just not stay cool. The temperature kept creeping up. And then when I was clearing out stuff from inside, I found some literature in there that shed a little light on the problem.
I found the original build sheet, which showed the Red Diamond 450 gas V8. And then an article from May 1996, when it was about to be converted. And then another article from November 1998 after it had been converted to a diesel.
Now when my dad got this bus, it had this vent cut into the back of it, which I had assumed had been there from the factory. But looking at these photos, it wasn't.
This is from the 96 article. And then the later article showed the painting process. My dad had the bus inspected, and that guy found out the fans were going the wrong way. And he definitely knew what he was talking about.
The air was set up to come in the side and out here. And he added a scoop and some fans to enhance that. But still, every once in a while on long hills, he actually had to pull over and stop in order to let the engine cool down. Now, I reversed that cooling, so it went in here and out the side. And I never actually had to stop. It was better. I had a few times on long hills I had to go real slow because the temperature was creeping up. I never had to stop. But I want to make it right, so you can actually just drive at road speed and have the engine stay cool. Someone that had worked with these Kenworth Pacific buses before left a comment and told me that that little scoop up top is where the air is supposed to go in for the radiator. So let's explore that. Now this appears to be completely blocked off, but it definitely looks like it has the surface area available to feed into that engine. Now where does that go? Now from the inside, you can see there's actually a duct in the back of the bus here. So that's where the intake is. There's the rear window. There's the mirror. So we have the original air intake, a giant bit of ductwork going through the back of the bus to bring the air down to the engine compartment, and that's all blocked off, with one piece remaining going through this duct to the turbo. Now it looked like all that was done under the previous notion that the cooling air should go in the side and then out the back. But everything is pointing towards that's not the way this bus is supposed to work. I'm absolutely convinced that this should be an outlet. We're going to have air go in the original inlet where it was supposed to, which will come down here and pressurize the radiator and push the air that way. So we're going to get rid of all this stuff in that block-off plate. All right, don't need the tape and the zip ties. This is all coming out of here. At least whoever blocked this off left the original grating. So we're in pretty good shape here. I think we can just peel this back. So now we know it was supposed to be here. Silicone holds pretty well, doesn't it? There we go. We got an air intake again. That's some pretty good surface area.
So I checked out how the current system was having airflow all over the radiator.
6 miles an hour. 10 miles an hour.
The overall speed coming out was under 8 miles an hour.
The fans moving air over this radiator is really inconsistent. I measure speeds from 0, where no air is going through at all because of the fans, to 16 right out of this fan. But on the other side of this one, where air was coming in, it was only like 11 or so. It's significantly less, which means it's not really moving air over the radiator at 16 miles an hour. It's just coming out at that speed. So I'm going to do a serious fan upgrade and then see what we got. It's finally time to get this, let's call it an arrangement. To get this arrangement removed, try to tidy it up just a tad. Now the radiator's in that hole, and I don't want to work in there. So I'm going to take some measurements and then build something out here for the fans, then install it in there. Now I've taken the measurements for the radiator, transferred them to this table. So that blue tape outlines where my core is. My fans need to fill up this area. So now it's a matter of adding fans. There's a lot of good fans that have come on vehicles in recent years, and by recent years I mean like since the 90s. And one of the well-known good ones is a Ford Taurus fan. So I bought one. This is from, I think it was a 95 Taurus. You could find these in junkyards. They're actually getting a little harder to find. I bought one new from Rock Auto for 79 bucks. Didn't seem too bad. This bus, I've got to make sure it stays running because it's not going to be easy to tow. So I want to make sure everything works on this. I need to get this fan to cover this whole surface area. They do make slightly bigger ones. The Mark 8 is what I looked into that would be a little bit larger. I'm going with a smaller one. And the reason is I'm not going with a smaller one. I'm going to try to fit 2 of these fans in this radiator. So I think that should be enough airflow. Just a matter of getting them to all fit, because they don't fit as is. But now I'll just shuffle these around on this table until I get them where I want them to be, and that way I know they'll fit once I install them in the bus. Even though these fans are brand new, I'm going to make sure they work before I start cutting them. Because if they're defective, you can't return them once you slice them up. Probably. Yeah, that blows some air. This will be better. Getting closer. I didn't do any measuring. I just cut and trimmed and eyeballed and trimmed and kept trimming until I got what I wanted. Basically, I have a curve, another curve, almost like a yin-yang fan thing going on, but it all fits right within the lines of where my radiator is going to be. All I have to do is make a flat piece that goes here to the edge to make sure this area of the radiator gets some suction too. And I'm in pretty good shape. So I just need to figure out a framework to hold this in place. I started to clamp these tubes down to the table, and then I remembered how not flat my table is. So we gotta fix that a little bit. It's better. We gotta do a little more here. We've gotta put mounting holes in these someday. That day might be right now. I'm gonna drill through one wall with a bigger bit. That way, the head of the screw is in the middle of the tube. That's a little better. I've got most of the framework attached. Everything's looking pretty good. The fans are attached. We've got cross members. Pretty much these are all set and locked in position. Now the only thing I have left to do is figure out some kind of piece that'll continue the shroud all the way to the end of the radiator to make sure this section of the radiator actually has airflow too. So I gotta do a little sheet metal work. I found a nice piece of sheet metal in my scrap bin. Looks just the right size, already has some bends, already has some holes. Should make life easier. All right, the bends aren't really helping. Got to get rid of the bends. You can tell by the sound that one's flat. Now it's a good thing I picked metal with bends and holes because I had to flatten the bends. Now I'm going to cut off the holes. That was useful. There, no more holes, at least on that side. Somewhere around there. A lot of test fit and cut and test fit and cut on this one. There we go. And since I'm custom making pretty much everything, I gotta label stuff. I'm gonna paint this, so I'm gonna label on the inside. That way, paint the outside, I still know where it goes. I definitely don't need any of the mounting tabs on this side, so I'm just gonna mark this while it's here. I'm just gonna slice that whole thing off. Well, I pulled this apart for about the 37th time, and I'm gonna do some welding now. Now I can't actually weld the whole frame together because I can't fit this through the hole in the bus to get to the radiator. So what I'm gonna do is weld this 1 by 1 to this 1/2 by 1/2 in this corner, and then over here, I cut a little piece of angle iron and I'm going to bolt that on this tube, weld it to this one, so I take that apart and I'll have two L-shaped pieces that I can bolt together in there. Now this is a cross piece that mounted the fans. I added another piece below that as a diverter to keep the fans separate. In case just one's running, it'll pull air through that part of the radiator, not suck it in one side and come out the other. A couple tack welds are going to be done here. Definitely don't want to weld on a wooden table that's covered in plastic dust. So we'll just ignore that part. Got all the pieces painted. Now it's time to see if they fit. Not exactly convenient, but at least there's a good spot to sit. Okay, got one in. We got another learn from my mistakes moment here. The framework actually is fitting quite nicely in here. So I'm ready to attach the main frame to the flange here so everything's secure. My plan was to go in through these large diameter holes with this bit and a screw to attach the other side. But this bit doesn't fit. Apparently I forgot to measure the diameter of this bit before I drilled those holes. I actually already ground a little bit away and it still doesn't fit, so we got to take a little more off here. There we go, back in business again. And now we're getting somewhere. Self-tapping screws are not ideal for strength, but they have two things going for them. One is they have to be made out of pretty good metal, otherwise the drill tip wouldn't actually drill through. And two, you can put in a lot of them. I've got them spaced every 3 inches. I'm gonna have 16 of them in here before I'm done. Also, when the frame is jammed in here, it couldn't come out if it wanted to. So worst case scenario, the fans might flop a little bit, but they can't hit the radiator because the frame will stop them. They can't fall out because the shrouding will stop them. They're in there. And speaking of not being able to fall out, I actually can't install these. Straight backwards, this is here. So I can't actually go straight into that hole, which means a drill with a U-joint. In order to keep this from flopping around while I drill, I need to hold it, but it's spinning. Let me show you a trick. Take a socket or a piece of tubing, put that in the mix. It's got to slip over, and now I can maneuver this wherever I want while it spins, and I can get a good grip on this socket. There we go. The important stuff goes in next. Nope, doesn't fit. That little bit of shroud is hitting the lower hose. I think I can just notch the shroud and get around it. Right about there and about there. That should do it. This plastic's surprisingly thick. I just took a sander and thinned out the area rather than cut a hole, and hopefully that's enough clearance. That way I don't worry about any air leaks. There we go. That actually worked. The fan still spins too. We bolt this down before anything moves. And there we have it. It's all in there. We're ready to see if we have airflow once I wire them up. I'm hot wiring one fan right to a battery. We'll see what kind of wind we have from this. That's a good sign. Now the cooling fans are on, I need a way to control them. Now the previous set of fans had manual switches on the dashboard. There's one fan switch there, one fan switch here, and each had an indicator light to tell that they were turned on. But you had to constantly monitor the temperature gauge and turn the switches on or off depending on what cooling you needed. So I want an automatic system, and these fans draw a lot more juice, so I need something that handles more power than just a switch on the dashboard. So I went to the only resource available for anything, the internet. Two things kept popping up. A Volvo controller from a mid-90s whatever Volvo, and a place called DC Controls. Now there's a lot of information on putting the old Volvo controller in. If you just look up Volvo 2-speed fan relay, you'll find more than you want to know about that one. That would be the cheaper option, which is normally what I do. However, this bus is meant for long distance traveling. So everything I do in this unit, I want to make sure that it gets me somewhere, and if something goes wrong, I can at least limp all the way to a place I can stop rather than having to have it towed off the road, because that's just going to be crazy on this. I went to that place called DC Control, and I did an email chat with Brian back and forth a little bit. What I bought is his adjustable 2-speed fan controller. And this is meant for something like the Taurus fan. We have one power in, and a high and low for the different speeds. And this one's off a temperature sensor, so you have off, low, and high sequentially as it heats up. I got one for each of the cooling fans, and these are going to be wired independently. He actually set them up for 2 different temperatures. There's an adjustment to set where it turns on. So basically, as the engine heats up, it's going to go low, low, high, high, and have 4 stages of cooling fan with amperages varying from 17 amps at the beginning at 3000 CFM all the way up to 70 amps with 7600 CFM. This should cool something. Hopefully it cools this bus. So let's install them and see what happens. Now I've got both fans hot wired to high. I'm going to turn them on and see what happens. Hopefully we've got some wind now. Over 30 miles an hour coming out of the fan. Around 15 coming out here. Around 15 here. About 10 coming out here. Definitely better than we had before. There's 13, 14, 7. We have air moving over the entire radiator. Even in the areas where they didn't have a fan right in front of it, it just had that plenum area, still getting like 8 miles an hour of wind through there. You're gonna have the entire radiator cooling now. The actual forward connector is hard to find. I just went with spade connectors and different color wires so I know which one's which. I also banded one set of wires so I know which controller does which fan. Started wiring the first controller. I already made a mistake. So I went and bought the optional indicator light that tells whether or not they're on. That needs to be wired in with the high-speed fan output. Yeah, I forgot on the last one. So I added it into the second one. I gotta go redo that connector on the other one, but eventually I'll get this right. Look at some of the old wiring that fed power to the fans. Following this back, goes to this circuit breaker, through a few loops of wire, down to this junction of 2 battery cables, then up to a jump start switch that connects to the house batteries. So I think I'm gonna get rid of all that wiring and this cable and everything. Now that the fans are in, I buttoned up everything the way it was, so we have a apples to apples comparison when we test this thing out. For now, I'm going to keep the same scoop that pushes the air outwards. Hopefully that creates a low pressure area here for all this fan air to come out of. At least it should deflect any air from blowing in. I got a fresh wire, a heavy duty power going to a circuit breaker. That goes over to the 2 fan controllers. And I put these up here for a reason, because I opened up that vent. So if it rains, water's going to come down here. And I don't want these to get wet. There's actually a bit of a shelf here. So any rainwater will come down here. That should stay all nice and dry under this ledge. That's almost a hand width in. I could always add a flap right here to really protect it if it ever looks like this gets wet, but I think it's all going to stay dry. And basically everything's done except for the little indicator lights. Now I have the wires run for those, but obviously the wire isn't long enough to make it all the way up there. When Brian was making these up for me, he actually offered to give me extra wire, but between 2 strands, that's 70 feet of wire. So I told him just make them the regular length. I didn't need that because there already are indicator lights. This is the old fan wiring. There are these little fuse holders, and I think that's power that goes back to those indicator lights. So I could take these little LEDs, connect it to this one, and then connect it up front, and I should be all set. First, I want to make sure that's what these really do. Alligator clip time. There's power to one indicator light. We'll see if it switches to the other. So I moved the alligator clip from one wire to the other possible wire, and it worked. Those are definitely our wires, so let's hook them up now. Now I know these lights work as an on-off, but these new lights are voltage sensing and they'll change color depending on whether it's on high or low. I need to replace those regular lights with these, which means I have to get into the dashboard wiring. Now normally that's not something I'm leery of, but this bus is kind of a unique situation. The wiring is somewhat confusing. There's multiple dashboards. There's a lot of electrical tape and wire nuts and switches that float around and fuse holders and yeah, it's not really seeming like something I want to deal with right now. So we're just going to assume all that wiring's totally fine and ignore it. Now I'm thinking about it. Not only do I have the indicator light issue, that transmission temperature gauge never moved, so I don't think that works. And this tachometer did work, but then died. So I'm almost thinking I'm going to take off this entire dashboard and work on it from the backside and try to fix a few things at once. This unit isn't actually attached, so that's easy. It's kind of moving. It's not really coming loose though. There we go. Oh boy, there's a few wires back there. Alright, let's figure out where all this stuff goes. I wonder if I really need it all. Apparently, I'm going down the rabbit hole of wiring whether I want to or not. Here's the lights that I need. Right here is the wiring that goes to them. It appears this cluster of wire nuts is what holds them on. I was also realizing these switches that ran the old fans, I don't need them anymore. So I can get rid of big piles of stuff while I'm in here. I'm trying to label everything as I go so I at least know what it used to do and see if I need to hook it up again. This will be great soon. I've run into a number of connections like this. I didn't loosen that screw at all. These are not tight. I'm surprised we didn't have more problems than we did on the drive, because I found a few like this that were just barely touching. I'm glad I'm going through all this stuff. After taking away a few things in this area, I discovered this control. Apparently you can adjust the front brakes like a proportioning valve. That could be handy. Now this is the transmission temperature gauge. The entire time I drove it for 2,600 miles or so, it read right there in the low end of the green. Now, I like that reading, but I don't really believe it's true, because it did that even when I started up cold. Now, I've got some alligator clips hooked up to the positive and negative. I don't have anything hooked to the sender part yet. Alright, now we're going to hook power to it, see what happens. It jumped all the way down, so that indicates to me that the whole time I was driving it, it never had power hooked to it. Now the sender is just going to be a variable resistance. I got a potentiometer here so I can simulate that, and we'll just fake the variable temperature and see if we can get that to move. And now I'm going to rotate this to give me different resistances. Oh, there we go. Oh, the transmission's hot. Alright, it's cooling down. Going up. So, just by adjusting this resistance, I can make that move. So I'm thinking the gauge is okay. I think I just had a bad connection. Could fix that and we should be good. Now you can do the same setup with pretty much any gauge that uses a sensor. This is the temperature gauge. And they pretty much all go to ground with some kind of resistance on the sensor wire. So just by adjusting this knob, ooh, it's hot. Oh, let's let it cool. All right, now it's nice and cool. It's a good way to check a gauge. Pulled the tachometer from the old gas engine out of the dash and did a 3D printed piece that'll fit inside there. And I can put my temperature gauge and indicator lights in that. I put a little eyebrow on it so it shades the lights so they don't get sun on them from this window right here. And this is the end result. So now that will bolt in place of the tachometer. My little deflector's working. I got a shadow over those lights, so that looks promising. Now I think I have them all wired up. I'm going to turn on the ignition and see if this jumps down to 100 where it's supposed to start. Looks like this one's hooked up again. So we might have something that works. And this is what I removed from the dashboard area. All this stuff. It's a lot simpler now. Now I've got most of the dashboard area cleared up. The upper dashboard's gone. But I've got this glaring hole where the electric wipers are. Now apparently when they converted to a diesel, they converted from vacuum to electric wipers, and that's where this hole came from. But I need to do something about that. Luckily I need to mount this GPS speedometer because I really like this thing. So I'm thinking that'll go right there. They have a little tab where some suction cup went to it. I'm just going to put a screw there, and we should be good. When I took off some of these brackets, it looks like it was a different color underneath. Found a can of paint in a hot dog bun bag. I think this might be the right color. It was in the bus, so it's got to be one of the colors. Looks like about the right color. We'll give it a shot. My wife took over and repainted the whole dashboard because it really didn't match right, but looks good now. And this is our final configuration. From that big mass of wires and the extra dashboards and stuff, we have original switches, mostly original gauges, temperature, speedometer, transmission should be working now, air pressure, oil pressure, fuel gauge, an extra temperature gauge just in case, and a voltmeter with a USB charger that goes to that GPS speedometer. So I've got a full set of gauges. It's got a warning light for low oil pressure. I've got a wig-wag for low air pressure.
With that all sorted, I moved on.
Here I finally crawl around under here and see what we got. All the grease under here doesn't really feel dried out or anything, so that looks good. I don't see any major problems. Just going to go through all the grease fittings, grease them up. I don't see any problem with the air brake hoses. The cans don't look too rusty. Everything looks like it was moving freely. We got some kind of safety steer system attached. Found a brochure for that inside. Apparently it does something good. Not entirely sure about the portable water tank with the strap holding it on. That might take a little further exploration. But as far as the suspension and brakes go, it all looks pretty good. So I'm just going to pump everything full of grease and move on. I see some oozing out of somewhere, so it's got to be full. One fluid that's often overlooked is a manual steering box. Power steering boxes are easy because they have the power steering fluid, but manual ones have oil too. It's a little trickier to check it though. But you got a plug in the side, and oh, it's oozing out. So we got some. That'll be fine. Huh. I wonder what fluid that is. That's real thick. Oh well, there's some in there. Good enough. While I was crawling around checking the fluids, I ran across this. This appears to be a heater core, and that is plumbed into, there's a generator over there, it's plumbed into the generator cooling system. And then there's some ductwork going up into the floor. It appears that the generator heat will heat up this heater core and blow it inside. And guessing this is wiring for a fan. Now I have no idea what actually controls this. I didn't ever have it turn on, but that could be useful. The pinion seal looked like it was leaking. So first I'm going to check the level. But I'm also going to check that vent, because if that's clogged, it'll make some fluid seep out of the pinion seal. So I'm going to try that first, see if the leak stops, and then worry about fixing that. Because I don't really want to change the pinion seal right now. That was way too tight. Let's see what we got. Well, it's not pouring out. That's not too bad. It's down a little. Not enough that it would have caused any damage. I'm just going to top it off. It's starting to come out, so we're good.
Now on to the axle vent.
Alright, this actually does look kind of clogged. It's coated with stuff. There's a very good possibility it wasn't venting properly. There we go. Let me just clean all that stuff off of there. Trying not to drop anything in it. There's a little spring in there. I took that out and scraped a pile of goop out of this cap. So definitely wasn't free flowing. I don't know if that was a problem, but it's definitely better than it was. So good enough. I noticed these little cables at the side of the bus. So I figured I'd follow them back. And they go to these air tanks. Looks like these are storage tanks for the air for the brakes. And all compressors collect water. That looks like a drain. Oh, a little bit. Since this pipe is rusted through really evenly, it's almost like a joint. So I'm going to take off this. And I was looking at this band clamp back here. I picked up another one for like 14 bucks. That's the right size for over here, I think. So we're going to pop that one off and just put a clamp on it. Oh, bolt snapped completely off, so that made that faster. Now this is an easy way to do it. There, done. I'm going to deal with that belt tensioner. Some people suggested just replacing the idler pulley, because unless this is broken, the spring is going to have the same spring rate. And other people have said that you definitely need to replace the tensioner too. And those people said that by the fact that you can see it bouncing when it idles, that means that the spring tensioner needs to be replaced. I'm wondering if this whole arm acts like a lever action shock absorber and actually has some friction to it to keep it from hopping around. I am going to replace the whole thing because I want to see what happens. See the little plastic bit between these two? There's one in each one of these. Usually you put in plastic like that when something's rubbing. And that plastic looks thicker than this plastic. So it could be, even if the spring is still providing tension, the plastic that it's rubbing on is worn out, and that's what's actually letting it move, not the spring. All right, there we go.
It's still bouncing, but maybe not quite as much.
On this engine compartment lid, I never actually found a key to drive this latch. The belt sander is actually doing a pretty good job. And here's the end result. Put a little bit of a taper on it too, so I can always just push it in further to get a tight fit. That looks pretty decent. Now I need to put a handle on it. we go. We got a handle now. I'm also noticing that those wires that go right close to the turbo outlet, the casing looks a little melty. So I'm going to put a little heat shielding on that too. Luckily I save old heat shielding out of cars too. And there's a convenient threaded hole in the block. This stuff cuts super easy. So it's good to work with. Nice and formable too. There, heat shielding is installed.
It's finally time to take it out for a test run.
Now I'm going to try to measure the airspeed as it goes through the radiator. I'm not actually up against the radiator, so I'm not sure how accurate it'll be. Hopefully we'll get a sense of about what's happening. And I painted one of the blades yellow so we can see which way it spins. Because those fans aren't going to kick on for a while. So at the beginning part of this, we'll know what the natural airflow is with no fans pushing it any direction. Then we'll learn something, and that's good. Air pressure's up over 120. Oil pressure is a little under 60. I think we're ready for a test run. Alright, we're on the road.
Now the way the blade's turning indicates that the air is going the way I hoped. It's going out the side of the bus, the same direction as the fans. So that actually worked.
It's a little weird steering because the front tires are actually about 4 feet that way behind me. But get used to it. This is why I drove this way. We're about to climb up a long hill. So we're going to watch that temperature and see what happens. There we go. We're going to be going up for a while. Oh, we got a fan kick on. Fans. Now it's interesting having two gauges. This one's reading 190. This one's more. We're still climbing up. I'm on the gas pretty good here. Transmission's warming up finally. Now we're merging onto the interstate, still climbing. And I'm on the gas, we're going. Temperature is still just a little under 210 on this one. Almost back down to 190 on this one. Now you can see that semi in front of me, I'm actually gaining on them a little bit. So I'm able to handle road speed with the semis, which is all I'm asking. And we've been going uphill for a while now. This has been about 5 minutes uphill. Oh, we kicked into high. One of the fans just kicked to high speed. So we're cranking some more air now. We're still catching up on that semi slowly. We haven't kicked the other fan in. We're going on 6 minutes of climbing straight. Pulling a steady 55 up this hill. I think the temperature's gone down a little bit now. Temperature gauge is reading, I'm getting changes, but it's not getting too hot. That's a nice cool transmission. The second fan never hit high speed, the temperature's dropping. And I see flashing lights up ahead, so I'm gonna have to slow down. I haven't let off the pedal for 9 minutes straight here. This thing would have overheated way long ago before. We're in good shape. Someone went off the road there. Just letting off the gas. We kicked one of the fans down to low speed. We're now at under 210. This gauge is reading below 190. Interesting. I'm going to call that one a win. That is way better than this thing has ever done. We still had one more stage of fan speed before we even had to worry about it. So, we've got cooling. I wonder where I should go now. There's a tourist trap up ahead. Bet they have bus parking. And it's all downhill from here. The cooling system worked great. No cooling problems at all this run. Well, that's it for this video. I'm calling this cooling system a success. And the wiring even worked too. Everything seems functional. Now you may have noticed it took me a lot longer than usual to put this video together, and that's because I didn't do just this video. You also may have noticed a lot of other changes in the bus that I didn't talk about. I've been working on so many different things on this, I'm trying to group everything together in a video that makes sense. I also got caught up in the other camper project for a little bit too. And this camper even managed to grow some locking hubs. But you'll be seeing that in another video. So I got a lot more coming. But for now, mechanically, this thing's about ready to go anywhere. I just hop in and drive. So I'm real happy about that. I hope you guys are having fun with your projects too, and we'll see you next time. I feel pretty confident that those fans are going to work, but I got a backup plan in case they don't. It's this. I'd never seen one before, so I figured I'd show you guys in case you hadn't either. This is a hydraulic fan. Now this came off a city bus, the same kind of rear engine configuration, and they have the same problem. A mechanical fan doesn't really line up well, and so this one's just run off hoses. You've got a hydraulic motor directly connected to a fan. All you have to do is run hydraulic power to it, and you've got a ton of air. This thing's about 27 inches in diameter, so it doesn't even have to spin fast to make a lot of air. My radiator is about 26 wide, so I think I could just about squeeze this in that spot if I need to. I don't have a hydraulic pump. That's going to be an issue if I need to run this. Also, once I add a hydraulic pump, I can add power steering. So that could be a lot of upgrades. Hopefully I won't need this, but I'm going to hang on to it just in case. That'd be some serious airflow.